Hello, everyone. This is Professor DePaulo. Welcome you back to Psych 265 Research in Psychology. And today I'm going to be talking about how to write the discussion section of the APA manuscript that we're working on. So if you go under Content Written Assignments, if you go under Written Assignments tab, you're going to find all the links to the APA manuscript that you're going to be submitting or you have submitted so far. And we're going to submit the discussion section here as a PDF file. But first, we're going to go through the results and explain how the results lead to the generation of the discussion section. So we're going to find results gambling survey. Now, the results are done for you. I have written the results section for you based on the data we collected in the class with the survey that you were supposed to complete, the survey on gambling. So you completed this gambling survey online. I've analyzed it and I have tested the 5 hypotheses, and I'm providing the results here for you. And you're just going to basically bring this and copy and paste it into your final manuscript. So the results section comes after the method section and before the discussion section. So you don't have to write anything in the results section, it's already done for you. So let's take a look at the results of the survey. These are preliminary results, of course. So there were 5 hypotheses we tested. If you want to review the hypotheses, you want to go back to written assignments again. Let me just download this results section. If you want to find out what the 5 hypotheses were again, or review, so go to where it says Introduction APA Manuscript. And in the last paragraph of your introduction, you were supposed to have the 5 hypotheses, and they're right here. Positive correlation between impulsivity and gambling. Second hypothesis is positive correlation between depression and gambling. Third hypothesis is that men will gamble more often than women and have higher levels of pathological gambling behavior. Fourth hypothesis is gambling severity will be negatively correlated with life satisfaction. And the fifth hypothesis is gambling severity will be positively correlated with attachment avoidance and attachment anxiety. So let's take a look at these. And these are just 5 kind of basic hypotheses to test. There's nothing really crazy going on here. There's no advanced analytical methods needed for this. It's mostly correlation and one t-test basically. So we're going to test those 5 hypotheses. Let's go back to the discussion section again, or the results, I should say. And let's go through the results. So the first hypothesis, there's a positive correlation between impulsivity and gambling behavior. And this hypothesis was supported. The correlation is 0.388, which is a small, a little bit small to maybe moderate correlation. So that first hypothesis was supported between impulsivity, positive correlation between impulsivity and gambling behavior. So as impulsivity increases, gambling behavior increases. Or as gambling behavior increases, impulsivity increases. It's non-directional, of course. Hypothesis 2, there is a positive correlation between depression and gambling behavior. That was also supported here. 0.567. So now we're getting into a moderate to somewhat large correlation, especially in psychology. So there's a real strong, moderate to strong association between depression and gambling behavior. So mostly as you gamble more, depression increases, or as depression increases, you gamble more. Hypothesis 3, there was a statistical trend between for men reporting more pathological gambling than women. And so there was a difference, but it wasn't statistically significant. It was 0.075. We need 0.05 or less to be statistically significant. And the reason why it was not statistically significant is because we only had 17 participants, or 18 participants, I should say. And there were very few men that took part in the survey. I think it was about 4 or 5 men compared to 13 women. So it's very difficult with such a small sample to see a difference there. There was also no statistical difference in whether men and women gamble in general. So the pathological gambling was leaning more towards men more than women. But in terms of gambling in general, there was no difference between men and women. Once again, probably because we had such a small sample, especially a very small sample in men. Gambling severity was negatively correlated with life satisfaction, negative 0.261. That's a pretty small correlation there, but it's a negative correlation. So as gambling severity increases, life satisfaction decreases. And finally, gambling severity was not negatively correlated with either attachment anxiety or attachment avoidance. So there was no relationship there. That they're actually very small positive correlations there. So it's very close to zero. There's really nothing going on between attachment anxiety, attachment avoidance, and gambling severity. So our results are mixed. Some hypotheses were supported, some were not, and there are reasons for that, of course. So let's go to how to write the discussion section. So the discussion section should be 4 paragraphs. So 4 moderate to large paragraphs, right? Focusing on the following items. So you're going to write the word discussion and you're going to center it at the top, non-bold, non-italic. So that's your major header discussion. And then you're going to start paragraph 1 below that. In paragraph 1, you're going to restate your hypotheses. So there are 5 hypotheses. You're going to restate them and tell the audience whether you support or fail to support each of those hypotheses. So if you look at our results, we supported a couple hypotheses and we failed to support a couple hypotheses. So you're going to go through hypothesis 1, restate it, and tell the audience whether you supported it or not. So you're either supporting the hypothesis or you're failing to support the hypothesis. You are not proving anything. You're not proving that it's right, that it's correct. You are not proving that it's wrong or it's incorrect. You're either supporting it or failing to support it. You're going to do this in plain English without using statistical terminology. So all the statistical terminology goes into the results section. In the discussion section, you're summarizing the results. So you're summarizing the results of the 5 hypotheses without using the statistical jargon. For example, hypothesis 1 proposed a positive correlation between impulsivity and gambling behavior. That hypothesis was supported based on the results. All right, so the results are right here, 0.388. So you're just going to basically say that hypothesis 1 proposed a positive correlation between impulsivity and gambling behavior. This hypothesis was supported in the sample based on the survey. And then you're going to do something similar for the other 4 hypotheses. And that's going to make up your first paragraph. It's basically restating the results without the statistical jargon. Now, paragraph 2 is a little bit more work. So you want to go through each hypothesis and what you found, or what we found as a class, in the 5 hypotheses that we're testing right now. And you're going to basically tell the audience whether the results we got from our survey, the class survey, was similar or different to previous research. So when you're doing that, you need to cite the previous research. And you probably have some of that previous research in your introduction section. So we found a positive correlation between impulsivity and gambling behavior. Is that similar to the study that you read that you maybe talked about in the introduction? If it's similar, state that it's similar to the study by so and so, and make sure you cite that study in paragraph 2. So you're going to need citations in paragraph 2 to compare and contrast our results as a class to the articles that you read when you were writing your introduction. So you should have 5 studies cited in paragraph 2 based on the 5 hypotheses we are testing. So, are the class results similar or different to the previous research out there? And make sure you are citing APA style, author, comma, year. So you paraphrase. If it's similar or different, this is similar to the study by so and so, and give me the year, right, of that study. Or this was different. And if it's different, make sure you state that it's different, right? So state explicitly whether each result is similar or different to previous research that you looked up. You may also talk a little bit about why the results are similar or different from the previous research. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but you can talk about the difference between our class study and the previous research looking at these hypotheses. That's paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, if you fail to support your hypothesis, explain why. So there's a lot of reasons why we failed to support our hypotheses. One of the reasons, the biggest reason of all, is the small sample. The sample is very, very small. We only have about 18 participants so far. Now, this sample will grow as time goes by, but right now we are only looking at 18 participants worth of data. That's a very, very small sample, and the vast majority of these people that filled out the survey do not gamble. So when I looked at the ratio of gamblers to non-gamblers, it was only a handful of gamblers. And there are many reasons for only a handful of gamblers. The sample was predominantly female and younger in female. And that is a group of people, young females, that do not inherently gamble as much as some of the other demographic groups. So if our sample was more balanced, where we had, 50% men and 50% women, we'd expect there to be more gambling behavior because the men gamble at a much higher rate than women, especially at this age. So that's a major limitation of the study is if you're collecting mostly women in your survey on gambling, you're going to see a lot of non-gamblers. And that huge amount of non-gamblers or the high percentage of non-gamblers makes it hard to find or support hypotheses involving gambling. So there's a lot of problems with that. There's a lot of problems with the study in general, right? I mean, it's a survey. Are people going to be honest answering a survey about gambling? Sometimes. Sometimes people are not honest answering surveys about things they don't want to talk about necessarily. For example, if you gave out a survey about drug use, you generally get distorted answers. Even if the survey is anonymous, people feel uncomfortable talking about things like drug use or alcohol abuse. So that's a limitation. That's called social desirability. And the other limitation, of course, is the small sample. And the big part of the small sample is the ratio of women to men, where men tend to gamble more than women. We have very few men in the study. Are there problems with internal and external validity? So you want to basically state the problems with internal external validity. So internal validity is the ability to draw cause and effect conclusions. You cannot draw cause and effect conclusions with a survey. So there is a problem with internal validity because we're using a survey and we're not doing an experiment. It's correlational. We cannot draw cause and effect conclusions based on a correlational survey. External validity is looks at the sample and is the sample representative of the population? Well, once again, the sample is young, predominantly female, predominantly non-gambling. Is that representative of the general population in the world or in the US or even in New York State? Probably not. I mean, there's a reason why New York State legalized gambling. New York State didn't legalize gambling uh, because no one gambled. They legalized gambling because people gamble like crazy. And now they're letting people gamble online and they're going to make money from it. So the idea that New York State legalized gambling just because gambling's not a big deal is complete. It just doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense. They're legalizing gambling because gambling is massive. And it's massive among a younger population, but primarily younger males compared to younger female. So this sample, which consists almost entirely of females, young females, is not externally valid because it doesn't represent the population, which tends to gamble a lot. So you need to explicitly state whether the study has internal or external validity, and there's a problem with both of those here. That's paragraph 3. So limitations being, small sample, the gender differences, not enough men in the sample, the age range of the sample, which is predominantly very young. These all limit the conclusions we can draw. And then paragraph 4, what are the real world implications of the results? Well, there's a lot of important implications of the results of the study because we're looking at what are the predictors of gambling behavior in a younger population. The problem is our sample's not big enough and we need more men in the sample. That's the limitation, right? But if we get that, which I plan on working towards by recruiting people from other disciplines other than psychology, psychology is predominantly female, right? The people taking psychology, people taking this class are overwhelmingly female. So I plan to recruit from other classes and other places where I'm going to get more young males, and I expect that to sort of increase the amount of gambling behavior we're looking at. And that will tell us what are the factors associated with gambling in a very young population where gambling can be a problem. It's not like, gambling's not a problem until people become older. Gambling starts very young. And problems with gambling start young, especially when you can access it on your phone, which is really a horrible thing for for a psychologist to look at this. It's I shake my head that the gambling is legal and that you can access on your cell phone because you're just encouraging people to become pathological gamblers. And it's not good because you can gamble 24 hours a day. There's always something to gamble on. And I am not a gambler. I don't like gambling. I see it as takes the enjoyment out of like watching live sporting events. If I have to gamble on them, it takes the enjoyment out of it for me personally. So I'm not a big fan of gambling. But there are plenty of people much younger than me or my age or older than me that are really into gambling. So there's a lot of implications. How do we stop gambling behavior, reduce gambling behavior, reduce the problems from gambling behavior? Well, one way would be get New York State to ban online gambling, which they won't because they're making too much money off of it. The other way to do it is look at what are the correlates? What's causing or what's playing a role in people getting involved in gambling? And can we target that so we can prevent gambling at a younger age? Because gambling is a big problem. It is addictive behavior. And if we're going to worry about substance abuse and alcoholism and other forms of addictive behavior, why not worry about gambling? Because it still can ruin people's lives. And how would you address the limitations of the study in future research? Obviously, increase the sample size, uh, have the gender balance sort of relatively equal if possible, right? Get more men in the sample, get more gamblers in the sample. And all that can be done by just increasing the sample size. Maybe get the sample from different locations to increase the external validity of the sample. There's a lot of ways to do it. Maybe we need to ask different questions. Maybe I'm not detecting gambling behavior because the questions are worded in a way that you have to be a gambler. to respond positively to it, or maybe there's social desirability. Maybe I should change the wording of certain items. I mean, there's a lot of ways. So think about, how I wrote the study to begin with, and ways you could probably make the study better. And there are plenty of ways to make the study better. I mean, I personally, when I write questions or I tend to, draw up hypotheses and study them, there's you make mistakes. There are plenty of ways for me to improve the survey. Or maybe the survey by itself is a mistake. Maybe it's something you got to do interviews with, like clinical interviews rather than using surveys. Surveys are usually the first step, though, to generating data, and generally the cheaper step because you don't have to pay people to do interviews. And researchers don't want to do their own clinical interviews because they have bias. So you really want to train people to do the interviews for you because they're going to be less biased. But there's a lot of ways to address the limitations of the study, come up with a few of your own. If you're conducting research, how could you make it better? So that's 4 solid paragraphs about, the gambling study, and give me 4 solid paragraphs, double space, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. It ends up being a page, maybe a little bit over a page, double spaced. And that's your discussion section. You don't have to attach the results section. I already wrote it for you. Just leave it. Just put it into your final paper. And then you're going to save it as a PDF and you're going to upload it to Brightspace where it says discussion. And then you're done. And if you have any questions, you can email me. You want to meet from my office hours, whatever you want to do, let me know and I'll try to help. So hopefully that helps you write the discussion section. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out to me. If not, I'll see you next time for the references, the title, the abstract, and the reference section. Goodbye for now.